afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to our press conference today. I'm Dodge County Sheriff Dale Schmidt, and with me today I have our District Attorney, Andrea Will, PJ Schobel, our Medical Examiner, and Lieutenant Taylor Nails, who's our Lieutenant over our Criminal Investigative Division. I'll be presenting a series of slides to you today, and then at the end we'll have questions. They'll be available if we have any questions for them. First, I want to start with why are we here and what authority do I have to investigate crimes within the prisons of Dodge County. We're here today because we want to talk to you about 4 deaths that have occurred since June of 2023. And the authority that we have to investigate those crimes is that we actually have 4 prisons which fall within Dodge County. We have Dodge Correctional Institution, Waupun Correctional Institution, Fox Lake Correctional Institution, and the John C. Burke Correctional Center. The Dodge County Sheriff's Office for many years has investigated all crimes that occur within those facilities, all 4 of them fall within the geographical boundaries of Dodge County. I also want to make a clarification, since I have all of you here, none of this has anything to do with Dodge Correctional Institution, but routinely people do confuse the Dodge County Correctional Institution with the Dodge County Jail. They are not one and the same. The Dodge Correctional Institution is a state-run facility which is a prison, and the Dodge County Jail is the county jail run by the county and specifically by the sheriff. Today, what I want to talk about is 4 prison deaths that have occurred within Waupun Correctional Institution in Waupun. We have 4 decedents that have passed away. They occurred on June 29th, 2023, October 2nd, 2023, October 30th, 2023, sorry about the typo there, and February 22nd, 2024. We refer to them as decedents today because there is a constitutional amendment that was passed a couple of years ago, regarding crime victims' rights. And we want to be careful that we are respecting those rights of crime victims. And just because an individual may have passed away does not mean there are still not victims. Those victims then become the family and next of kin. So today we will be referring to those individuals as decedent 1, 2, 3, and 4. I want to start with a phrase that is used by the Department of Corrections that they use to define their inmates. They don't call their inmates, they call them persons within our care. The investigation that we have done has revealed that that phrase does not accurately depict what persons in our care should mean. An inmate is defined by the dictionary as a person confined to an institution such as a prison or a hospital. The dictionary defines taking care of someone as to protect someone and something to provide the things that a person needs. We'll get back to that later. Next, what I want to explain to you is what cause of death and manner of death is. Now, that's not a determination that I make as the sheriff. That's a determination that is made by our medical examiner. We're going to share that with you on all 4 of these deaths so that you have an understanding of what the cause and manner of death is, but I also want you to know what they mean before we throw those terms up there. The cause of death is a disease of injury that leads to death. The manner of death is how the death is classified by the medical examiner for purposes of the death certificate. I'm going to start with decedent number 1. Decedent number 1 was pronounced dead on the morning of June 29th, 2023, due to apparent suicidal action. He was housed in general population for 20 days, from June 1st through June 20th of 2023. 3 days during that time, he received 0 medications. 7 days, we found that only one of the staff distributed medications was distributed. So 7 of those days he received 1 of 2 which were distributed by staff. During that time, we also discovered that staff are not required to wear body cameras during medication passes in general population. So we don't have any video confirmation, all we have is the documentation of that they put down in their emergency medical records. It is unknown if any staff issued medications that were refused by the decedent or simply just not distributed. I can't tell you if they just weren't given or the individual said, I don't want them. There's just no entries in the EMR to give us that information. There were other medications that they call keep on person. There was 2 medications that this individual had keep on person while in Gen Pop that he was responsible for requesting refills from HSU, the Health Services Unit, and taking care of those internally within the cell. They were not distributed by staff. So those during general population are not ones that we're certainly concerned with them, but we're not concerned about distribution by staff on a daily basis. On June 21st through June 29th, decedent number 1 was transferred to the restricted housing unit in Waupun Correctional. At that point, all 4 medications this decedent was receiving were then issued by staff because keep on person is not allowed in the restricted housing unit within the prison. It is unknown if all medications were distributed on June 23rd to decedent number 1. Video evidence does exist, however, that there were at least some medications that were not distributed on June 28th. We can say that he did refuse his morning medications that day. Video evidence exists of a majority of medications being distributed during his placement in RHU, meaning they did what they were supposed to do the majority of the time. Documentation of medication being distributed, however, was vastly inaccurate and did not match what the video evidence of the distribution showed. They simply did not keep accurate medical records when they were distributing those medications. We have several concerns that were identified with decedent number 1. There was inadequate distribution of all medications to the inmates. There were some that were missed. They received most, but there were still some that were missed. There was inadequate documentation of that medication distribution, as I just discussed. Due to that electronic medical record system and the requirements, if an entry from a prior medical pass was missed, correctional officers would enter inappropriately, refused, or not appropriate at this time, so they could bypass that past one to get to the next distribution point, which is certainly against DOC policies and should not have been occurring. While there are policy violations, none of the policy violations in this incident rose to the level of criminal activity. The behavior by DOC officials remains concerning, and it has been addressed with DOC administration. And so this case is closed. The cause of death for decedent number 1 is ligature hanging, and the manner of death as determined by the medical examiner is suicide. Decedent number 2 was pronounced dead on the evening of October 2nd due to an apparent drug overdose. Decedent number 2 was housed in general population. The investigation shows that there are no concerns of staff misconduct as part of this investigation. Of great concern, however, is the quantity and frequency of contraband being able to be smuggled into Waupun Correctional Institution. Smuggling of contraband continues to be investigated by partnering law enforcement, and as a result, this case does remain open. Cause of death, acetylfentanyl and fentanyl toxicity. The manner of death is deemed an accident. There are no charges at this point in this incident. Decedent number 3 was pronounced dead on the morning of October 30th, 2023, due to a stroke. He was housed in RHU, the Restricted Housing Unit, from September 2nd, 2023 through October 30th, 2023. He had multiple medical episodes with no medical assistance provided, including stumbling and collapsing while being escorted back to his cell from the Health Services Unit. There is no documentation provided to any supervisor about this incident. An episode of loud, labored breathing reported to a supervisor. No action taken by that supervisor. Laying on a bed with no response or movement during a medical pass. That was passed on to the next shift regarding strange behavior and labored breathing, but no action was taken. Multiple attempts were made to wake decedent number 3 with banging on the metal door and yelling. No response was ever received from that decedent. And I will tell you, after watching the video of the banging on that door, it was not just a knock on the door. It was taking the trap door and banging it open and shut over and over again without any response, and no action was taken. Numerous medical passes were done with no response from the decedent. Numerous hourly rounds, and I'll just define that for you in a minute, were conducted with no response from the decedent. Numerous hourly rounds were skipped by staff or were done in a fashion which correctional officers in no way could have checked on the status of that inmate, even to the point of simply walking down the hallway without even looking into the rooms. So what is a round? A round is an hourly check, most recently changed to a 30-minute check, which is done by correctional officers, and it's one of the most basic functions of a correctional officer. This is done to ensure that inmates are alive and not in distress. It is trained to look for the rise and fall of chest and other signs of life when the inmate is sleeping. It's obvious signs of life were not seen. If it's obvious that signs of life were not seen, a supervisor must be contacted to take action. A nurse and a correctional officer finally identified that the decedent needed to be checked on. That nurse was at the end of her shift and relayed to the incoming staff that a cell entry was recommended and a cell entry team would need to be assembled. The incoming nurse, without visiting the decedent's cell, determined that there was no medical need to make entry into the cell of the decedent. Supervisor working also ignored obvious concerning behavior and failed to take action to check on the needs of the decedent. It was determined that the decedent passed away following this time period and likely was in dire medical distress when the incoming nurse determined that there was no medical need to make entry. Evidence shows that the decedent was dead in his cell at least 12 hours before he was discovered on the morning of October 30th, 2023. I'll say that again. He was dead in his cell for over 12 hours until they located him the next morning. Cause of death: multifocal infarcts due to multifocal cerebral venous thrombosis. For those who are not in the medical profession, that means a stroke. The manner of death is determined as natural. Decedent number 4 was produced dead during the evening of February 22nd, 2024, due to maltreatment by staff. He was housed in the restricted housing unit since February 13th, 2024. He was found in a cell with a strong odor of bodily fluids and urine. Garbage and clutter was strewn about the cell. The decedent was suffering from mental health concerns and medical concerns. The decedent was discovered deceased by DOC staff at 3:28 p.m. The medical examiner, during his examination at 6:10 p.m., opined that the decedent had full rigor mortis, and while no time of death could be determined, most certainly died during the morning hours, a significant amount of time before he was located. Water was shut off in the decedent's cell numerous times for what appear to be legitimate reasons. Now, what might legitimate reasons be? A cell might be flooded. There may be maintenance issues that are causing concern. Or other legitimate reasons why they needed to turn it off for the safe operation. However, when water shutoffs occur, they must be documented. They were not. Notification to supervisors must occur, which most times did not happen. Notifications up the chain must occur, which did not happen. Water appears to have been shut off for significant periods of time, leaving the decedent without water for a significant period of time. It gets worse. Correctional officers failed to feed the decedent 9 out of 12 meals over a 4-day period. Policies and procedures regarding hunger strikes were not followed, which require removing an inmate from their cell when an inmate is not eating, so that they can be closely monitored by the Health Services Unit. Correctional officers failed to conduct required rounds on numerous occasions. However, staff intentionally initialed that rounds were completed when they were not, and supervisors were aware of this practice occurring regularly. Correctional officers viewed and reported to others that the decedent's condition was deteriorating rapidly. However, they failed to proceed to initiate cell entry for a welfare check. At no time during his time in the restricted housing unit did a medical professional ever have physical contact or direct contact with the decedent except through the cell door. Correctional officers did make some notifications to supervisory staff. However, supervisors made no attempt to further investigate the condition of the decedent or his well-being. Security staff notified nursing staff that the decedent had not eaten food for a couple of days, was drinking sewage water, and played in the toilet. Hunger strike policies were not put into effect to do a cell entry or to monitor the medical condition of the decedent. Senior DOC officials failed to enforce rules of the department for administration and for officers. Staff was not overseen to ensure that policies and procedures were followed, which led to the demise of the decedent. The decedent was in a camera-equipped cell. However, the camera was unusable for safety observation of inmates due to poor condition and no visible images could be viewed, meaning you have somebody in a monitored cell for the purposes of making sure they're being watched, and you can't watch them the way you are intended to watch them. The cause of death: probable dehydration and failure to thrive due to malnutrition. Other significant conditions: hypertensive cardiovascular disease, myocardial scarring of unknown etiology, acute kidney injury, possible rhabdomyolysis, delusional disorder, and the manner of death: homicide. Ruled homicide mostly because of the dehydration and malnutrition that occurred. On February 27th, 2024, I made contact with then Secretary Kevin Carr over the phone. I spoke with him because there was a need to ensure that these things did not continue to happen. We had a conversation about a lack of documentation. We had a conversation about a lack of staffing. And while we all understand that staffing is a concern with the Department of Corrections, I can tell you that sheriffs, police chiefs, all have concerns with staffing as well. We need to find ways to make sure that we safely conduct business. Spoke about the lack of training with staff and arguments that how can we train our staff when we don't have enough people to take care of the floor. I can tell you, as an administrator, one of the most important things you can do is train your staff, especially when you're in a situation like this, to make sure they know what they're doing and we don't end up with situations like these. Lack of in-person and timely investigations by internal affairs. Internal affairs investigations take time. I certainly understand that. But what we were seeing is a significant amount of time for these internal investigations to take place and for action to be taken. Additionally, many of the interviews are done remotely, which I can tell you, from an investigator standpoint, you cannot properly interview people remotely and be able to read the room and do a proper investigation. Lack of procedures being followed for proper cell checks. I think we've talked about that already. Lack of consistent staff. They have staff being brought in from all over the state, taking on a prison for 2 weeks and then returning. Understand they're trying to fill spots, but certainly creates a consistency issue. Lack of accountability. Lack of accountability really falls to making sure that your staff know what they're doing, making sure they're trained, making sure they're following policies and procedures, and when they're not, ensuring that they are trained on what to do. It's very important that you don't have supervisors reinforcing that it's okay to sign a log that was not accurate. All of these things contributed to the deaths that occurred at WCI. My intent of the conversation with the secretary was to bring light to the issues and ensure no further tragedies occurred. I was done with these deaths occurring in these prisons. 4 is 4 too many. Secretary Carr was agitated by the information presented, and he should have been. However, he did not take any personal responsibility, but rather shifted that blame to Warden Hepp and the culture of Waupun Correctional Institution. Not saying he's wrong in that, however, there needs to be some responsibility from the top down, and it was clear that there was none there. 3 days after my phone conversation with Secretary Carr, he submitted his letter of resignation to the governor with only 1 week notice. I do not find that to be a coincidence. It was also brought to my attention later that there were similar type incidents that have occurred at Green Bay Correctional Institution. They were investigated in Brown County. No criminal charges were filed in those incidents. However, we have similar issues that occurred during those incidents. And a stern warning was issued by the investigator to the Department of Corrections, meaning this is not isolated to one facility in the Department of Corrections. We have several missteps that we have highlighted, that we want to make sure are corrected. We are operating the oldest prison in the state of Wisconsin at a dangerous and reckless manner. In fact, Waupun and Green Bay Correctional Institution are 2 of the oldest 10 prisons in the entire country. We are failing to properly staff these facilities. Waupun Correctional has over 50% vacancy of staff. We are failing to properly update the facilities to be safe for our inmates and for the staff. For example, water shutoffs. There is no way for us to be able to go back and track how long the water was shut off. The only logs that they have are paper handwritten logs. In this day and age, we should be having proper logs to make sure that we know the water is off. That oncoming staff know that it wasn't accidentally shut off by somebody in on a previous shift. Failure to properly update or replace the housing units. Failure to train staff and reinforce staff. Failure to hold staff accountable. You've heard these already here today. Failure to keep inmates of the institution safe and, most importantly, alive. Failure to provide a safe and efficient facility for staff to work at. Failure to ensure policy compliance. Failure to document. One of the most basic responsibilities of a correctional officer and their staff. Recommendations. I don't like to come with a complaint without having possible solutions. My recommendations to the state of Wisconsin are you seriously consider renovating the housing units or closing and replacing Waupun Correctional and Green Bay Correctional. The governor has indicated to the legislature, who I have spoken with, he's not in favor of building another prison. I would ask, why not? 1 new prison could replace 2 prisons. Or 2 renovated prisons would be much better than what we have now. It will save lives. It will provide for a more humane treatment of inmates. It will provide a need for less correctional officers. The housing units that they have now require too much staff to do what they need to do. Wouldn't it be great to be able to reduce the amount of staff needed to run a facility? Provide proper and updated monitoring technology so the cameras work, so that you know when the water is on, you know when the water is off. You're able to properly monitor medication pass. Provide accountability measures to staff. We have to make sure that the staff that are in these facilities are being held accountable for their own benefit, and provide a safe environment for inmates and for staff. I can tell you that my staff has investigated over 250 cases a year in the prisons in Dodge County, and we don't have time to investigate the rest. There is more that can be done to hold inmates and staff accountable within these facilities. Additional recommendations. The Wisconsin Department of Corrections should immediately implement the same standards as are required for all Wisconsin jails. Every year, the Department of Corrections comes through per statute, and they do an inspection of my jail and the other 70 jails in the state of Wisconsin. And they provide me with a report, and they provide the department with a report of the various things that need to be worked on. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. Am I expecting the Department of Corrections to be perfect? Absolutely not. Are there going to be some deficiencies? There will be, because we are not perfect. But I will tell you that our inspections have made us better, and that's the purpose of it. Those inspections identify issues that we need to correct every year. They don't have that for the Wisconsin prisons. Each warden is responsible for ensuring the safety and security of the prisons within their control. But there's no inspections. They need to start. And I would call on the legislature to enact legislation to make it the same. So we're all playing on the same field. It's interesting the Department of Corrections are the ones who do the inspections here. Cameras, especially in observation cells, need to be fixed to allow for proper monitoring of inmates. Give your correctional staff additional resources to make sure the people that they are taking care of are safe. And provide training to not only your frontline staff, but to your supervisors. If you don't provide the training and then reinforce it with accountability, you will set your staff up for failure. And failure is not an option when you are dealing with the lives of the individuals that you are charged with. Serious reforms need to occur to prevent the entry of contraband into the institutions. Body scanners. I know there are some in the prisons, but we need to make sure we're scanning individuals coming and going from the prisons to prevent contraband from getting in and out. Out is okay. Getting it in. Thorough searches of not only visitors, but staff. We need to make sure nothing is coming into these prisons. Strict policies and procedures that prevent smuggling of contraband. Perhaps it's time, with all of the contraband that's been getting in, that no contact policies, be implemented to prevent passage of contraband to inmates until they can get this under control. I do want to note that since Secretary Hoy has been appointed to the position of secretary, and even before that, I see things moving in a positive direction. Secretary Hoy visited me in my office this last week, Thursday, and we had an excellent, positive conversation. I think he wants to move things in a positive direction, and I'm eager to see what Secretary Hoy can do to correct some of these issues here. I always want to make sure that I give credit where credit is due, and so far, so good. Now I want to talk about some criminal statutes that we believe are violated as part of these investigations. There are two statutes that we are focusing on today. The first is abuse of residents of penal facilities, State Statute 940.29. That is a Class I felony. I will read the statute for you so you all have a good understanding of what it is. The abuse of residents of penal facilities. A person in charge of or employed in a penal or correctional institution or other place of confinement who abuses, neglects, or ill-treats any person confined in or a resident of any such institution or place, or who knowingly permits another person to do so is guilty of a Class I felony. The other statute, misconduct in public office, Statute 946.12, sub 1. This has other subsections, but this is the one we're focusing on. Misconduct in public office, any public officer or public employee who does any of the following is guilty of a Class I felony. Intentionally fails or refuses to perform a known, mandatory, non-discretionary, ministerial duty of the officer's or employee's office or employment within the time or in the manner required by law. These investigations have shown a blatant disregard for the safety of human beings, and arrests must be made and have been made. There must be accountability for the actions and inactions of state employees. As the sheriff, I am angered at how these men were treated and how they died. 9 individuals are being charged in connection to decedent 3 and decedent 4. All individuals being charged were informed of the pending charges, and I requested that they turn themselves into the Dodge County Jail this morning by 9 a.m. to be booked into the jail. They were not arrested yesterday or the day before. All individuals had an appearance this afternoon at 1 o'clock at the same time as this conference. The arrests that have been made related to the abuse of penal facilities for decedent number 3. Gwendolyn Peachy, formerly Vic, age 50 of Burnett, a registered nurse. Brandon Fisher, age 29 of Fox Lake, a correctional lieutenant. Tanner Leopold, age 27 of Waupun, a correctional sergeant. I will note that all persons are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and that applies for the following slides as well. Related to the death of decedent number 4 for the same charge, abuse of residents of penal facilities. Jamal Russell, age 39 of Beaver Dam, a correctional officer. Alexander Hollefelder, age 31 of Waupun, a correctional sergeant. Brandon Fisher, age 29 of Fox Lake, a correctional lieutenant. Jessica Hosfeld, age 47 of Oshkosh, a registered nurse. Related to decedent 4, misconduct in public office, statute 946-12 sub 1. Jamal Russell, age 39 of Beaver Dam, correctional officer. Sarah Ronsbottom, age 35 of Oshkosh, correctional officer. Jeremy Chalker, age 41 of Brandon, correctional sergeant. And the person who is responsible for the entire facility, Randall Hepp, the Waupun Correctional Institution warden. I am asking that the community remain calm. This no doubt has victims' families upset, and rightfully so. I'm by no means as upset as they are, but these cases have infuriated me. We're asking people to remain calm. Investigations have been lengthy. I know many of you have contacted me many times over the last several months asking the status. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to release that until now. We need to make sure information is released at the proper time. Accountability will now occur, which is what people are looking for. The First Amendment will be protected. If there are individuals who do want to voice their concerns, they certainly can do so. What I want to caution the public on is if there are any vigils or protests that occur, which I'm hoping doesn't happen because we're holding people accountable, that you cannot exercise your First Amendment right of free speech while violating another law. We will support anybody who exercises their freedom of speech. But if anybody violates another law in doing so, i.e. blocking a street or blocking traffic or any other crimes, we will take action and we will make arrests. We are happy to protect anybody who does want to exercise their freedom of speech, however. Persons in our care, I'm coming back to this. This phrase bothers me at Waupun Correctional Institution. It is not a phrase that I would use at Waupun Correctional Institution. These people were not cared for. And they are people. They were not cared for at Waupun Correctional. And we are going to hold those responsible accountable. In conclusion, there are criminal complaints that our district attorney has filed. Those will be available for you at the Dodge County Clerk of Court's office at the courthouse. You can make contact, they'd be happy to get you copies of that. We will not provide additional information outside of what is in that criminal complaint. And really we aren't going to take a whole lot of questions about the incidents themselves we'll refer you to the criminal complaint on those. We ask that you respect the privacy of the families. This is difficult for them. They are struggling with this. Please, if they ask you, I don't want to talk to you, please allow them, let them be. And I've told them that they have that opportunity to do so. They certainly can talk to you if they'd like. While these cases are currently closed, and they are in pending criminal and even civil litigation, we do reserve the right to reopen these cases if new information is made available, as they are highly complex cases. So if at some point you do request information and we can no longer grant access, that might be a possibility. We just want to make sure we do the best for the victims involved. With that, I want to open it up to any questions that any of you may have.
Sheriff, do you feel like you're doing DOC's job for them in this case?
Absolutely not. I am doing what a criminal investigator, I shouldn't say that, my staff are doing what criminal investigators are doing. I want to thank the staff of the Dodge County Sheriff's Office, the medical examiners, the DA's office for all the work they did on this case. They have their own internal reviews. They have to make determinations what they need to do. But at the end of the day, we are bringing recommendations as a result of our investigation, an outside party's viewpoint. I hope they take those recommendations seriously, but that's my job to do that investigation and provide feedback to them.
Let me rephrase that quickly. They did their own investigations. Theoretically, they should have come up with the same conclusions that you did.
Those are questions for the Department of Corrections. Maybe they have. I can't answer for them.
Sheriff, why are you concluding these investigations if the federal probe is ongoing and Evers has asked not to conclude in a letter sent out today?
The federal investigations are not into these death investigations. They're two separate investigations altogether. The federal investigation, while we worked closely with them, are not into anything that we talked about here today, short of the contraband issue. Two totally different issues. That's why we are able to close them. If something comes to light as a result of their investigation, or something else that we find, then we will open this up. Something you need to understand about federal investigations and local investigations is one doesn't supersede the other. Your local sheriff and police department are the primary law enforcement agencies. And if you talk to the FBI, they will always tell you we are here to support the local law enforcement agencies. We have an excellent relationship with our FBI partners. In fact, I had a conversation with one of the supervisors about this last week. So we control the investigation here into the death investigations. What they do separately is different, but I will tell you they have been part of our meetings.
What about the 20 people that are still under investigation in DOC's internal probe? And you're shutting this down right now, the governor's saying, please don't. We have a bunch more people we're looking at. Why are you closing this investigation?
Because we have completed our portion of the investigation. The governor does not have our documents, does not know what we have seen, nor do the Department of Corrections staff. We have completed our investigation. It's now their turn to do their own internal investigations. Those are not criminal investigations. Those investigations are personnel-related investigations that they now must do. And as a result, they will get our records when that's available. They can do their investigation into those. If they determine that there is something additional criminal that we weren't aware of, that's why I made that statement at the end, that we can certainly reopen that investigation to investigate further. But at this point, it's two completely separate investigations. The Department of Corrections is not doing a criminal investigation. That's my job.
So the security director of the prison is responsible largely for the prison's security, safety, staff, inmates, and all that. Why not charge the security director of the prison to investigate?
State statutes require that the warden is responsible for all safety and security of the prisons. When you're reading through statutes, a lot of times what we have to do, and we work closely with the district attorney to do, is do those statutes, can you reach a burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt that statute was violated? And does that person apply? Did that person have integral knowledge? And so those are the things that we have to weigh in determining if there is criminal charges that need to be made.
Do you think that they share some amount of responsibility with the warden?
The warden, by statute, is responsible for the safety and security of the prison. And sometimes the statute restricts us on what we are able to, what and who we are able to charge, especially in a case like this.
Sure, but you've talked about how some other members of the, or subjects of the investigation were not charged, but they could have had a role in some of these deaths. Why not the security director?
Because the evidence that we have does not allow for us to file charges. It's that simple. You can file charges when the statute is violated. And if you cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that statute was violated for that person, you can't file a charge against them. Very simple.
Can you replay the slides that list the names of all the, at some point here, of all the arrestees and charges? You went through them kind of fast. I counted 3 slides.
Yep, what's going to happen after this conference, we are going to put out a press release with all of those for you. That'll be made available on our app, on our Facebook page. You'll be able to grab
So we
that.
need those names to get the complaints.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I can back it up right now for you, and you can start grabbing them. And then let me know when you want me to move to the next one. Next one.
Sheriff, within the last hour, we've had multiple inmates who are currently at Waupun reach out to our station directly expressing distress, saying there are people there yelling that they're suicidal, they're not getting the services that they need when it comes to mental health and medical. Being that we're at this point, what's your reaction to that? What concerns do you have being that current inmates that are still alive there feel like they're suffering?
It's my hope that the governor, the secretary, and the administrator of the Department of Corrections are going to take those concerns seriously and make sure that they address them. That's on them to take care of because that's their responsibility. I don't have any administrative control within the prison. My only ability is to investigate crimes that occur. So that really is a question that's going to have to be posed to the state of Wisconsin and how they're going to manage that.
Sheriff, are Waupun and Green Bay Correctional still under modified restrictions? Have those prisoners gained any additional privileges since April?
I cannot comment on Green Bay Correctional because I'm not familiar with that. I don't have the answer as to, I know that restrictions have been loosened. I don't have the exact answer on to what extent. That's a great question for the Department of Corrections.
Sheriff, do you have any indication that these people you're showing on the screen are also part of the internal and or federal investigation?
That's not part of my investigation. So I'm not.
Theoretically, you know they're the same people or not?
I'm not able to comment on who those people are because I don't have that information and I don't want to make an assumption.
Do you know anything about Green Bay as far as what was investigated there and why charges are being brought?
Those are questions that you can certainly request. I know there are documents that you'll be able to obtain regarding that information.
You referenced like video footage that was part of the investigation. Will any of that be released, or is that something that would have to be like open records requested from you guys or DOC?
So right now, these cases are active because they're going through the courts. And so public release of information is going to be closely guarded to make sure that we don't impact the now litigation end of it. So until that happens, likely we won't be able to release any of those videos.
And then DOC said that they cooperated with your investigation. Is that a fair characterization in your estimation, considering, you know, it sounded like they weren't doing their jobs?
Yes, DOC did cooperate. I think a big part of that is that I do have a detective that's assigned strictly to prison investigations. They're there regularly. They understand the systems, and as such, they cooperated fully.
Why are you optimistic the new secretary can get this on the right track?
I'm optimistic that he has provided me with the right things so far. That's yet to be seen. He has been very open and honest with me. He has been accommodating to the needs that we have had, and we have so far a very good working relationship. And I'm optimistic and guarded optimism, of course, but I like to give credit where credit is due, and he has earned that to this point.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Can you talk about the length of time a person could go away for a Class I felony?
I think that's a great question for our district attorney.
So, these Class I felonies carry with them a maximum penalty of 3.5 years, which means 18 months of initial confinement and 2 years of extended supervision. So that's the maximum penalty.
Local standard reports are talking about there were 3 Narcan doses administered yesterday to an inmate
That did not happen at Waupun Correctional Institute. I can tell you that there is an investigation ongoing into that, but there has been no deaths.
Would you say with the current conditions at Waupun Institute that the inmates that are currently there are in danger?
I think that's up to the staff from today going forward. They know they've been on a heavy microscope because my detective bureau, the vast majority of them have been dedicated to this investigation and have been well-known faces there. They know they're under a heavy microscope, and I think some changes have been made so far. Additional needs to be done. I think that depends on how the Department of Corrections acts and reacts to all of this information here today. I am optimistic that positive changes will take place and that hopefully that occurs. Unfortunately, if it doesn't occur, we will be here to hold individuals accountable if they misstep again.
You mentioned the rounds went from every hour to every half hour. Are there any other changes that have been implemented that you can share with us?
I can't really speak educated on that. That's a good question for the department.
Can you relate that the treatment of the inmates occurred because of the lockdowns, or the lockdowns made it worse?
I do not believe that the lockdowns had anything to do with any of these deaths. In fact, the lockdowns should have made it better for the accountability and ensuring the safety of this facility. Any narrative out there that the lockdowns are the cause of these deaths, I think is absolutely bogus. And I did not see anything in these investigations that links the two at all.
Are you able to release what the decedents were in jail for?
That's not relevant here. I think we'll refrain from talking about that.
Sheriff, at least one of the families of a decedent that you talked about today says they were upset that they weren't aware that this news conference was coming or what you guys had found, your message to families who felt like they were left in the dark.
Well, that's not true at all. We have had meetings with families over the last couple of weeks, and everybody knew that there was a press release or press conference coming. I know there's one family we didn't give exact date and time, but they certainly knew. And I did see the comment you're talking about. They certainly knew there was going to be a press conference because I told them exactly what it was going to be about.
Can you speak to, you as a sheriff, you run a jail yourself, and this is something you're responsible for. How was it investigating a situation like this from that perspective, and did this change anything that you feel about your own facility?
It actually made me extremely proud of the people that I have working at the Dodge County Jail. They are, in my opinion, second to none, and do a fantastic job. Are they perfect? Like I said before, no, I'm not perfect. But they do a fantastic job, and watching what they do and going over and seeing what they do, and then reading and watching videos and seeing what was going on here, I was proud of my staff. It infuriated me as what I was seeing within the prison, however, because a lot of the things that they were doing, my staff don't do every day, and they do it very, very well. So it was an interesting perspective. I will tell you that it was a very difficult conversation and a very difficult decision because we do have professional contacts with these individuals. But I think running the jail gave me unique insight into what needs to happen and gave me more of an appreciation for why they need to make changes at the Department of Corrections.
I've talked to just about every family involved in this that's lost a loved one, and most of what I'm hearing is, mental health is related. Do you think that there's a need for more mental health resources within the prison?
I think we have a epidemic across our country, not just in our prisons, of mental health related issues, and resources is one avenue. I think what I talked about related to simply renovating and providing a better environment for those people to live in is number one. Before you get to resources, having an environment that you can control, having an environment that you can make sure that there's easier access for mental health staff comes before you provide additional resources. Because in a prison setting, I'll tell you, getting in and actually talking to somebody outside of looking at them through a small little window is virtually impossible in a setting like they're in right now. The environment is number one. They cannot make, shouldn't say they cannot, it'll be very difficult to make improvements to the mental health treatment of inmates in the environment they're in right now. It's a good question.
You mentioned that you spoke with Kevin Carr, and shortly after that conversation, he resigned. I guess, or is there any chance he, I guess why he was head of DOC and there were all these issues, why wasn't he charged? Is there a probe into him and what he knew when he knew it?
That's a very similar answer to the question that I answered before. The statute requires that the warden be responsible, not the Department of Corrections secretary. I'm not saying that we didn't investigate all avenues, because certainly we always do when we do criminal investigations, but you have to go back to the statute. And the statute holds certain individuals responsible. And really at this point, based on the evidence we have, the statutes that were charged are the ones that are applicable.
Is Warden Hepp still in your custody?
I am not confident if he still is, or what happened after the initial appearance at 1 o'clock.
Is there a federal hold on him at all?
No.
Can you clarify, did all 9 individuals voluntarily turn themselves in today?
Yes, they did.
It seems everything falls under the umbrella understanding of neglect. Is there any indication that any of that neglect may have been like retaliatory for difficult inmates, or was it all just umbrella?
I do not see anything that there was any intent at all. This is just a failure to do your job. Take 2 more questions and then we'll end the conference here today.
Do you know if Warden Hepp is still acting? Warden, I don't know if you can even answer that.
That's a question for Department of Corrections. I can't answer that.
Why was nobody charged with homicide if it was ruled a homicide?
You know what, that's a good question. I'm gonna have the medical examiner explain that.
So when I determine manner of death for the purposes of signing a death certificate is different than the criminal charge of homicide as determined by the DA. And so manner of death and homicide just means that another person was involved in the death of a person. It is not the legal definition or what the DA would charge. The DA can charge however they want on any of the manners of death.
DA, same question.
So I think when you read the criminal complaint, it'll become more clear. In order to charge homicide against any individual, I have to show that one individual or several individuals were responsible for this, and I don't think that it was any one individual that was responsible. Our criminal code, even negligent homicide does require an element of intent, and like the sheriff said, I don't think that there was any intent in these cases. I think this is purely one of neglect. So it was a discretionary decision that I made based on the evidence and what I thought I could prove in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, thank you. Did you get all of the names, sir?
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you everybody for coming today, and I appreciate you covering this. Have a good day.